Welcome back, everybody. Tonight, I have Canadian author, researcher, and adventurer Stefan Verstappen with me. He has written several books, among them The Way of the Warrior and The Art of Urban Survival. He gave us the documentaries Defense Against the Psychopath and Paradise Stolen. If you have never seen that, I highly recommend you check that out. He has also been training for decades as a martial artist, and if I'm correct, Stefan, you also taught martial arts.
Yeah, I've been teaching for 35 years.
Yeah. So welcome to Night Flight.
Thanks for having me on, Judith.
Yeah. So I heard you say that psychopaths, they thrive in hierarchies. Is that correct? Did I hear you correctly?
Oh, yes, I think so. Because they're able to manipulate a hierarchical structure to their advantage by assuming leadership positions in a hierarchy. And so this is ideally suited for their mentality, which is based on their abilities to deceive, lie, manipulate people, con, and their complete lack of conscience in doing any of this makes them very effective leaders and politicians. So they naturally gravitate to hierarchical structures, and they're ideally suited to get to the top of every type of system like that because of, again, these deceptive abilities. Good, average, decent people don't understand the mentality of these psychopaths. We all assume that everyone else in the world thinks more or less like we do. Maybe they have something a little bit sneaky or some problems or some issues, but basically we believe that other people think like that, like us. And that's a mistaken belief, and it's very dangerous because these people don't think like us at all. All they think about is themselves, mostly greed and self-aggrandizement, but also the strange characteristic of these people is that they enjoy spreading misery and suffering to others. They enjoy to watch other people suffer. And that's something most of us can never understand. So we always ask the question, well, why would they do that? They're causing so much suffering. And the first excuse everybody uses is that they're stupid. And you hear that all the time when people talk about the government. Oh, how can the government be so stupid to do this? Well, it's not stupid at all. They were doing that on purpose because that's what they enjoy. So the problem, what I find is with a hierarchical structure is because you have people that take orders. And I find this, I'm something of an anarchist in that sense. I don't want to obey your orders. And at the same time, I don't need anybody to obey my orders. I don't want to tell anybody what to do. You live your life, I live mine. But that's not how hierarchical structures like a government or a military or a church structure, that's not how those things work. You have a pyramid scheme where the people at the top give the orders, and those orders are passed down. And so long as everybody obeys, that's how the system works. Now, the problem is, yeah, it's an effective structure for getting things done. But if you aren't able to set up some sort of internal filter to prevent the psychopaths from assuming that top position, then once you have one of them in the top there, then that entire pyramid structure is now used for the evil intents of the people that run it. And so that's why they tend to thrive in that type of a structure.
Let's assume that once in a while, maybe not really at the top, but let's assume once in a while a so-called good-hearted human being gets caught in the net. And do you think that is one of the reasons why we see a lot of depression and maybe alcoholism in these types of spheres?
Well, we're seeing a lot of depression and alcoholism in all facets of society now. Uh,
Mm.
you know, male suicide is through the roof here. Um, and the reason for that is not, some good people are caught somewhere near the top of a pyramid. The reason for that is that the psychopathic mentality, we in the United States, they always say family values. But what we have are psychopathic values. Their control of every major institution in the world today is complete. And so when you have these people in control of everything, what they do is they spread their own sickness to the population around them. And that sickness is a form of psychopathy itself. It's, they divide and conquer people and have them fighting amongst each other. And with the monetary system that we have, everything is monetized. Your emotions, your actions, everything you do must be regarded in a form of monetary value, profit and loss statement. Should I feed my cat? What's the profit and loss statement? All that. And so what it's done is it's created a poisonous culture. We live in a toxic culture right now. Everything has been poisoned: the media, the entertainment, the arts, the music, the literature, the books, the magazines, the television, the commercials, the advertisements. Everything is poison. It's absolutely toxic. And that will have an effect on people. And what happens is good people will rail against this type of poison. It's an infection, and so they'll get like a fever. They'll want to, push this poison out of their body, but they can't, and that therefore results in a lot of the sicknesses that we see today, including alcoholism and addiction and depression and suicide. And studies have shown this numerous times, that the key factor for many of these diseases is that people are alienated. They don't belong to anything anymore. But this not belonging, this alienation, is a direct result of the psychopaths that run things, because they know by dividing you and alienating you, you cannot mount a successful resistance to their poison and to their influence on society. And so they do this on purpose. Of course, they want to alienate you. And if everybody just gets drunk and kills themselves, they're happy about that. So what we're seeing is, it's sort of a secondary effect from having these people run the world.
Mm-hmm. So you already touched a little bit on it when you said that these psychopaths are spreading destruction, misery. Do you think that they even look at us as the same species?
No, if you ever want to meet a supremacist, because here they're always throwing around the word, Europeans are supremacists, and I've never met a European supremacist, but
Me not either.
No, I've never, I've grown up in Canada. When I was a young child, we never had a minority in the country. I never saw anybody, no Muslims, no black people, no Chinese, nothing. It was all, Irish, Scottish, Italian, German, Norwegian, Swedish, And during all that time, because they're always saying, oh, that breeds racism and that breeds hatred for gays. And I never heard a word. Nobody ever spoke any ill will to anybody. And even in the early years when we had lots of immigrants coming in from the third world, and I've never heard a Canadian say a bad word or do anything to discriminate. And the same thing with now the big hoopla is, the gay and the LGBT here. When I was a young man, we used to hang out a little bit in the musical industry, and that's when I first started meeting lots of gays. Nobody was persecuting them. Nobody cared. There was no, like you see in the movies, somebody wants to go beat them up. I've never seen it, never heard it. And so, it's all part of the, so the supremacy comes in then with the psychopaths. They think they are superior to everybody else. When you are stupid enough to vote for them, they think you're an idiot and that you deserve what you get. It's the same attitude that con artists have when they swindle people out of their life savings. When they do that, they don't feel guilty at all for taking your retirement funds. What they think is that you deserve it because you're that stupid and that inferior to them. And therefore, it's their right to steal your money. And so the psychopaths are all like that. Psychopaths all have a superior attitude. They can never do anything wrong. They're never to blame. They will never apologize unless it's a tactical psychological technique. If they think by apologizing that they will disarm you, then they will apologize. But it's of course never heartfelt. So they are perfect, and whatever they do to you is because they have the right to do it to you. And so that's really a supremacist attitude. They do think of that they're a higher, more evolved species than the rest of us.
Mm-hmm. For better understanding, there are two different types of psychopaths, the secondary and the primary psychopath. Could you elaborate a little bit on that?
Sure. There's a lot of information, and a lot of it contradicts itself too. But if you're going by the DSMV, the Diagnostics and Statistics Manual that the American Association for Psychologists or American Psychology Association puts out, and it's like the global warming reports. It's just the opinion of a bunch of people that decided to agree on this. There's no scientific basis for any of it. All their diagnosis is for psychopath and psychopathy, and then they have a half a dozen other classifications, such as antisocial personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, sociopath, psychopath, pathological narcissism. Well, it gets very confusing, and I kind of believe that this might be done on purpose, because for the longest time you couldn't find out any information on psychopathy from, you ask most psychologists if they've studied it or heard about it, and they will tell you no, because it's something that the psychopaths want to make sure you don't know about. Once you're onto them, once you figure them out, then it's the emperor's clothes. Once you see the emperor is naked, they get very uncomfortable with the idea of people finding out who they and what they are. So there's a lot of confusion around it. So in my writing, maybe it's correct, maybe it's not correct, I don't know. But what I have done is I've grouped the similar characteristics together into two types of psychopaths. And one type is the primary psychopath. With the primary psychopath, it appears that this has a genetic component. These people seem to have been born this way. And there is research that suggests that there is a gene that triggers psychopathy. They call it, and I hate the name for this, but they call it the warrior gene, which of course they're not warriors. I would call it the evil gene instead. But there does seem to be a gene that is prevalent in primary psychopaths. And these are the people that you can tell when they're small children already that there's something wrong with them. They're the 3-year-old, the 2-year-old boy that tries to cut the tail off the cat. That will sneak into their siblings' bedroom late at night and stick needles in their arms. These are all true case stories, by the way. And throw knives at their mother and threaten to murder people, threaten to kill people. I mean, this is all at an early age. So you can see something is not right with that child. And this may be the genetic component coming through. And so those people would be primary psychopaths. What the secondary psychopath is people that don't necessarily, or were not necessarily born with that genetic predisposition, but who become psychopaths through trauma and life events and through culture. So, for example, a person maybe fell out of a tree when they were 12 and hit their head, and that damaged the prefrontal frontal cortex, which seems to be responsible for such human qualities as empathy. And when that part of the brain is damaged, they will then start to behave like a psychopath. Another example of a potential secondary psychopath, or the cause of secondary psychopathy, is drug addiction. If a person is addicted to drugs, they are automatically a psychopath because the addiction drives their behavior from that point forward. And that addiction causes them to do anything, say anything, uh, be anything, lie, steal, cheat to get their drugs. And so, for all intents and purposes, for those of us who are, let's say, normal, um, when we're dealing with them, we're still dealing with a psychopath. They won't care about you. They, they might pretend because again, it furthers their schemes or their goals or their ability to manipulate you, but they don't care. They care about their addiction. And so that would be, again, a secondary psychopath. And then another form or another way of turning people into secondary psychopaths is through culture. And I can give two examples from the video. One example is if you were born in a bad neighborhood and you're a young boy and the area is ruled by street gangs, well, eventually the street gangs will pick up on you. And you're going to be given a choice: either get beaten up every day at school or join the gang. So it's very tempting to join the gang. But once you join the gang, you now have to adopt the psychopathic values that that gang holds. So if the gang says, oh, we're all going to go over to the neighbor's school and we're going to go beat up a bunch of kids there. Well, if you say, no, I'm not going, well, then you're not in the gang anymore. And then you're going to be the one gets beat up again. So you will have to go along. Or if the gang says, we're going to break into a store and we're going to steal, cigarettes. Well, you better go along. You can't say no. And so while you're in that gang, you have to exhibit these types of values. And most of these values are psychopathic because with street gangs, the leader of the street gang is a really great chance, I would say 90% chance, that they're a primary psychopath. Who else, becomes a street gang leader? Not nice guys, not, Rhodes scholars, not bookworms, it's vicious, violent thugs that become the leaders. They're psychopaths. And so they will ensure that all their members exhibit those qualities. The second example I could use, because we got one from the sort of the lower economic spectrum, but also in the upper echelons. I think, what was that company there in California, the Enron. Enron, the energy company in California back in the late 80s, early
Mm,
90s.
mm,
So they released some recordings they had taken of these traders and how these traders were bragging amongst each other how they had robbed pensioners from their money. So here again we get these con artists. They're stealing retirement funds and they're bragging about it and they're laughing about it. How stupid all these people are to invest their life savings into this fraud of a company. And it turns out that the entire corporate culture of that company was, again, psychopathic. That was encouraged within the culture. You had to go out and you had to screw people or you wouldn't have a job. So here's your choice. You either have a job and continue to work for the company, but you must adopt the psychopathic values, which means you cannot care about your victims. You just have to prey on people and manipulate them and con them and steal their money steal as much money as you can, irregardless of the suffering and misery that you have caused. You can't worry about, all these people being homeless and wondering what to do with the rest of their lives after you've taken all their money. They don't care about that. They can't. And so they become, again, secondary psychopaths. Now, they might not have been born that way, but because they adopt those values, for those of us dealing with them, it's as if we are dealing with a primary psychopath. It makes no difference from our point of view because they're going to try and destroy us and take advantage of us and make our lives miserable. So after they've stolen your money, you can contemplate whether or not they were a primary or a secondary psychopath. But the fact of the matter is your money is gone. The people that took the money don't care, and that's the end of it. So those are the two types of psychopath. The good news is with the secondary psychopath, often if you can remove them from that influence and give them a bit of training and support and education, they can stop being a psychopath. So if you can rescue the young boy from the street gang and say send him to a Boy Scout camp in the woods for a year, that boy will stop acting like a psychopath. And the same thing if you can, take one of these executives and find a better job for him where he doesn't have to exploit people in order to make a living, then there's a better chance that they will return to a more normal, healthy mentality. But with the primary psychopaths, there are no cures.
Yeah. So, but what you just described, with these traits, these attitudes that they display, I see that a lot in the corporate world and in politics.
Yeah. Well, because it's all been taken over. The psychopaths, I don't know, I go through history and I try to search for signs that this wasn't always the case. But it pretty much was always the case that psychopaths are the ones that run things and have for probably thousands of years. I'll give you an example. I was reading, Chinese history. My first book is on Chinese military strategy, the 36 strategies of ancient China. And I read a lot of Chinese history, and especially the succession struggles with dynasties and one emperor succeeding the next emperor. And many times there would be a case where the emperor died, he didn't name an heir, or even if he did name an heir, it doesn't matter. But maybe there's 2, 3, 4 people contending for the throne. And this happened in European society. It's the same thing. Now, out of those 3 or 4 men that are contending for the throne, the one that will get the throne is the first brother or uncle or cousin that murders the other 3. So then he becomes king. There's a famous story about the first emperor of China, who was an insane lunatic. Finally, he died, but he didn't leave an heir. So the eunuchs decided to put up this one son that they had already corrupted and were in total control of. But there was another son that was far away. So they said, invite the other son and we'll have a meeting and tell him that everything is okay, that because the other son was older, so naturally he would be the first choice. And so under the cover of making friends among family, we'll meet in a neutral place and we'll discuss the succession, and I will succeed to your age, and you can become emperor because I'm the younger son. And anyways, the other son, who was apparently not as psychopathic as the others, believed this story, and they met at a tent and they celebrated, and the next morning the evil son walks out, the elder one having been poisoned during the night. So this is who then becomes emperor, and this is the type of power struggle I have seen in Japanese history, Chinese history, French, English, Roman. Look who becomes the emperor. Caligula becomes the emperor, not Germanicus. Not the son of Julius Caesar, no, but Caligula, because they chose him. Because why? Because he murdered his uncle, and He killed all his cousins. So he becomes the emperor, and this happens over and over again. So we have that kind of a society, but now in modern times, you see it, I think, even more, because at least in ancient times, all these psychopaths were, tended to gather around the royal court, because, the court is a magnet for sick mentality and psychopaths. But, people in the villages and the towns and cities, they were left relatively, unaffected by all this, mental illness that took place in the capitals. But now, because of, the modern age, with our media and our culture and our, everything from the TV and the movies, now this mentality has spread. It's become a virus, that it has infected our entire society. So now everybody is exhibiting the symptoms of being a psychopath, and I think that's why you tend to notice it more. You wouldn't have noticed it if you lived in medieval England, unless you actually went to the court, and almost nobody, the average person never got to see the king in their life. So how could they tell? But now you see it all the time. You see it in the movies and in the TV and the newscasters and the journalists and the writers and the entertainers. They're all exhibiting this. Watch a music video. All you see is pathological narcissism. The looks on everybody's faces while they're, performing, like, they fart golden nickels or something. The self-love is so evident in everything they do. This narcissism, for somebody of my mentality, I find it really sickening to watch these people. Why are you so smug? What have you accomplished? Okay, you can sing, but you didn't cure cancer. You didn't create world peace. Why are they so in love with themselves? But that's the virus. That's the psychopathic, narcissistic virus.
Mhm. And I think a lot of people are sick of it, and there have been throughout histories movements again and again and again. And somehow everything gets hijacked, taken over, even the very famous ones, let's say the French Revolution,
Mm-hmm.
Taken over by the Freemasons. Somehow the peace movement was co-opted by the hippie movement, with sex and drugs and rock and roll.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have Black Lives Matter. And I'm not saying they do not matter, that is nonsense, but at the end of the day, all lives matter. So how do we, you suggested something that I found very intriguing, and that was the leaderless revolution. Could you explain that a little bit?
Yeah. First of all, with the French Revolution and how everything is always subverted, I have to say that I don't know how to explain it, but there seems to be another force in action in our societies these days.
Hmm.
There's another influence. And I know some people think it's the Masons, and or it's Satanists, but and I don't believe in any of those terms myself. These people might tell you that's what they are. I don't think that's what they really are. But there seems to be a collection of psychopaths that work in unison and have been working in unison with each other for centuries now, and they've recently become much more influential, and they play a large part in subverting all these movements. Now, for a psychopath, it's not that hard to subvert a movement. It's actually very easy. I'll tell you how it's done. You find out who the leader of the movement is, and then you go and you cold read them. This is what psychopaths do. They try to find your weakness. What do you like? Oh, you like young girls? I can get you some young girls. Oh, you like heroin? I have a friend that has some very good heroin. Oh, you like to drink? Oh, we've got the best booze. We own a distillery. Oh, you like young boys? Well, I have a friend who's got 3 young sons that really would like to meet you. I mean, whatever it is, you keep probing until you find out how you can hook the leader of this movement. And then, it could be even something as simple as money. Oh, you like lots of money? Well, I have some friends that are willing to give you a low interest loan for as much as you want, like Churchill. Um, so it's so easy. It's easy. Where are you going to find somebody that has the character and the resolve to resist all these temptations? Very few people I know can do that. That's why I often talk about the way of the warrior. I wrote a book on it because how many people have the strength of character to resist all the evil and the corruption that goes on around you? Even people that are basically good and decent, often what happens is they say, I give up. Yes, the world is evil. Let me join into evil because trying to do good has only resulted in my own suffering and destruction. So even then, but let's say then, okay, you did find somebody who's the leader of an organization, what, the French Revolution or the peace movement or Greenpeace or whatever. That is,
Excuse me, just 1 second. You are trailing out. Your volume is trailing in and out.
oh, I'm sorry. How's that?
Yeah, now it's better. Yeah, thank you.
My microphone was drooping. And so let's say you even are able to find somebody who's, upright, incorruptible. Then what the psychopath would do is frame you. Very simple. If I'm trying to get an advanced position at a big corporation, and I have one guy that's running, trying to get the same job I am. For me, and he's a good man. He's smart. He does everything right. So I want to get rid of him so I can get the promotion. Well, it's really easy. I go get some cocaine, or I get some child pornography. I stick it in his desk drawer when he's not looking. Then I go and spread some rumors around. Hey guys, did you see coke in his desk? Could somebody go take a look? So then, so it's easy to get rid of them. And then if that doesn't work, if you can't bribe them, if you can't seduce them, if you can't frame them and blackball them and blackmail them, then the final solution is they will just get rid of you. They have no compunction about killing you or maiming you or putting something in your drink that causes you to be very sick. And so for a psychopath to subvert any of these organizations is easy. And they've been doing it for thousands of years. But there is another force that seems to be at work, and it's a little bit more organized. But in any situation, you're going to have that happen anyways. So I've been studying, what's going on in our society, Judith, and it's horrible. We are in big trouble. I try to be calm. I have some friends. I tell them a little bit, and they get scared. I can see. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to talk about it. There's nothing we can do, which is a really defeatist attitude. Yeah, of course. If everybody sits back and says nothing we can do, then nothing's going to happen. Of course, these people get away with everything they're doing. So I try to be, very gentle in what I know. But I'm telling you, folks, we are in a serious situation with our society and our culture. We are a matter of months away from a totalitarian tyranny, slavery that will last 1,000 years. And it's happened in the past in history. There have been civilizations have collapsed that resulted in an absolute, post-apocalyptic chaos for hundreds of years. This is where we're going now. We need to do something. So, what can we do? Now, I know from my study of history that we could start a new political party.
Sorry.
Right? No, bad. You've heard that many times now, Judith, right? Well, let's
Yeah.
third party, like in the United States, they only have the two. Here in Canada, we have 6 or 7 now. In Germany, how many do you have there? 14? I don't know.
I stopped counting because I don't vote anyway, because I know there is no solution within the system. And if it were, then there would be no elections, if that would change anything.
Yeah, isn't that a quote from Mark Twain? If
Hmm.
voting changed anything, they wouldn't allow us to vote.
Yeah. Yeah, but
So,
we are quite a collection, and yeah, but I couldn't tell from the top of my head how many there actually are, and there is one in particular that is getting touted now. Everybody is AFD, AFD, and it seems to me people are always looking for a savior, as
mm,
if that political party would bring them to La La Land. Yeah.
mm,
And then you have the religious saviors, then you have the alien savior, then you the blue chicken cult, and you even have a group that believe that Putin is an archangel. Yeah, and on it goes. This nonsense, this parade of endless nonsense with this savior program.
yeah, yeah, I agree. I mean, if whatever savior is going to come by will be demonic, he'll be a psychopath. Here comes the savior. Oh, look, he's got horns and a tail and hoofed feet. Yeah, but he's the savior. Whatever savior they will present is guaranteed to be a psychopath. That's just the way it is. There's not going to be, any kind of a savior that can save us. So I know this. I've read the history. Every freedom fighter is tomorrow's tyrant, right?
Yeah.
So, and I've never encountered a story in history where this wasn't true. Or maybe the Indian Raja Ashoka, he might have been okay. Uh, there was two or three Chinese emperors. They kind of they succeeded in becoming emperors without having to murder everybody in their family, and they were basically pretty decent people. And they founded the golden age of the Song and the Tang dynasties. But I can't think of more than three or four people in history, and the other 10 million were all monsters. There's there's no solution there, and I'm with you, Judith. I don't vote. You know, what, why would I waste my time participating in your charade? We don't have a democracy. Besides, a democracy is not the best way of governing, anyways. I think a benign dictatorship would be the best. If you could, put Socrates in charge or Mark Twain, I would vote for Mark Twain as tyrant of the United States. If that had never come up.
Yeah,
But
but then you have a hierarchy as well.
yes, but human beings are machine-like creatures that can't seem to accomplish much without a hierarchy, with few exceptions. So, starting a political party or a new religious movement, here comes the Mahdi, a new savior, a new Messiah. All of these things are doomed to failure. It's impossible that they could succeed. So, in my attempt to try and, reason a way or a strategy, because, I study strategy. You know, if I'm so smart to write a book on strategy, can't I come up with an idea, how to save us, right? It's like, I've studied martial arts for 35 years. If I can't, beat up a mugger, what's the point? So I also studied strategy. So if I cannot come up with a solution, then what kind of a scholar am I? So I've been racking my brain. What can we do to fight this insanity? Because it's important that we fight, because if we don't, again, what's coming is hell on earth, and the destruction of everything we have accomplished as a species thus far. So the solution I have come up with and I don't know if it's an original idea, to be honest with you. I haven't come across too many people talking about it. I think I started talking about it first on a couple of radio shows about 8 years ago. But the solution would be a leaderless revolution. In other words, if you have a revolution that immediately establishes a hierarchy of
Mm.
officers and candidates and presidents, then again we're into the same problem. Whatever you form, whatever type of structure you or movement you try to create, it's only too easy for it to be subverted. And what the psychopaths will do is we'll let you flounder. You have 50 members, 100 members, 200 members. They don't care.
Yeah, you just exchange the actors.
Exactly. But once you start to get 10,000, 100,000 members, well, then they'll make sure they come in and destroy it for you and subvert it. But if we can form communities, groups of people that can work independently outside of a formal structure, then we have a chance. Now, there's two reasons for this. One, I don't think we have much chance of saving the world. I am sorry, I don't see it. We need a lot more people that are a lot braver and a lot smarter. And a lot of people right now are terrified. And I'm thinking, what are you going to be like when the bullets flying, when the secret police are knocking on doors at 4 o'clock in the morning? How afraid are you going to be then if you're this terrified that you can't do anything to save yourself now because you're afraid of being called a name, or you're afraid that people won't like you on the internet? Uh, well, then,
Yeah.
but they're cowards, Judith. We also have several generations of cowards that really never had to face life and death danger to do something in their lives and get somewhere. So they're cowards and they're terrified now. But it's nothing for the psychopaths in charge to flick a switch and turn everything into a much more terrifying situation with secret police and military rounds up and mass executions and re-education camps and starvation and disease. And they could do that overnight. It would just be the guy at the top. He says, okay, go ahead, do it. And boom, within 2 months, 3 months, you'll have 40, 50 million people starved to death. So then you should be scared. you know but
Mm.
right now they're terrified. So that's why I say I don't see a lot of chance, because if it looks like we're going to win something big, like some election, and then we're going to get all the bad guys and kick them out, if it looks like that's going to happen, it's not. But let's say in fairyland that this might happen, well, then they'll just shut it all down. They'll tear it all down. um, the whole infrastructure of society will just collapse. Maybe not forever. 6 months is all it takes, and after that, everybody will be marching in lockstep. So the first thing I wanted to do is, I don't like. Well, what I'm saying is that I don't think there's much chance, Judith, but there is chance for people themselves to survive. We might not be able to save the whole world, but there's a chance that we can save ourselves, our families, our friends, and our communities. And in order to do that, we need to form small, autonomous, independent communities of anywhere between 5 and 50 people that will support and look after each other, and that can respond to the conditions as they occur. If you can have a people that are united in a common purpose and support each other, your chances of surviving whatever the government or the psychopaths in charge throw at us, um, then at least you survive it, and you won't go down with everything else. And then, perhaps in a year or 2 years, things will be better. Here again, people saying, "Oh, if the grid goes down or if we run out of food, I will just kill myself." you know,
Mhm.
And I said, you know, look at Europe during the Second World War. Every major city was pretty much bombed into rubble. There was no more police. There was no food. There was no electricity. There were no train lines. There was no public transportation. There was no gasoline. People were hungry. Cities were destroyed. The governments either vacated or in absentia. Did Europe devolve into Mad Max? Did they run around hungry cannibals, killing and eating each other? Of course not. That never happened. And they lived through it. And those that were able to live through it, because of the terrible death toll, but most Europeans still lived through it. And then look what happened, 1950, after Germany was destroyed, bombed into rubble, we got people going to work and they're building Audis and they're having barbecues and they're going to the grocery store. So it was 5 years that you had to live through, 5 years of this horrific war. And here everybody's, if I don't get my Nintendo game, then I kill myself right away.
Yeah, my great grandmother, I happen to know her, and she survived both world wars, the first one and the second one.
Oh.
And she survived 8 of her 10 children. And she built a house 3 times in her life and lost it.
Yeah.
Mm.
Wow.
Yeah, that is what I call tough.
That's what you call tough. Yes, Judith, your great grandmother. And that's what the European people used to be like. They were tough like that. They were cowards and crying and screaming and demanding and the insanity that we've seen now. But that's what we have now. So if you're going to survive what's coming, and hope that after it's all said and done, you can build a better world, then you have to survive yourself. And the best way to do that is, again, through a small community, like either a very, an extended family or a church, or because these common values really help to bond people. And I'm not a Christian, but I'm all in favor of Christians because I understand the effect and the bonding effect that has, that allows them to work together. And whether I believe it or not, who cares? Nobody cares. What I care about is that people can work together and cooperate and share values, and therefore that they have a chance to survive. And all these cowards and these babies, they will die very quickly. They'll all be gone after a few months. So who's going to be left? It's going to be the tough people and the people that have organized now ahead of time and gotten ready. So that is part of the leaderless revolution. But here's the other thing about the leaders revolution. We can still, now that you formed a group to protect yourself, to support your own efforts, that group can also be used to fight against the government through non-compliance and non-violent revolution. And then as things escalate, it can be, an underground movement. It can be used to sabotage government programs. For example, if the government institutes the facial recognition, the 5G system, everybody's dropping dead from brain tumors. Well, listen, if you've got a small group of guys, they have a shotgun, they put on the black mask, one night every month, they go through town, they shoot out the towers. You can take one of those towers down with a shotgun blast, and destroy them. Okay, they'll be back the next day to put it up, but it costs you 35 cents to take out one of those towers with a shotgun. It costs them tens of thousands of dollars to replace it. Eventually, they will run out of money to replace it. And even if it's not a shotgun, then a paintball gun, or a water balloon with paint in it. Throw it on the camera, block out the camera. Now they have to send a crew to clean it, and maybe they have to replace it again. For you, it costs a water balloon and a little bit of paint. For them, it's, again, tens of thousands of dollars to repair the damage. So, a sabotage, a non-compliance, and you can do that without forming a big group that everybody knows that's what you're doing. So when the Greenpeace activists were, hammering nails in the big the redwood trees in California, well, everybody knew they were the ones doing it. But if you have small groups and you're not organized, you're not necessarily incorporated, or you are, but under a benign front. For example, say the Toronto Heritage Association. We study pioneer values, you know, but really you're a subversive counter-revolutionary group. Call it, you know, that's what the psychopaths do. That's how they took over the world, by saying, you know, we're going to form an orphanage for children like Stalin did, and then use that orphanage as a child prostitution ring. You know, that's what they do. So we can do the same thing, but for good. And if we had tens of thousands of small groups like that, one in every small town, a half a dozen in every city, and they don't need to follow any instructions because everybody knows what would be the right thing to do. And so I could tell my friends, you know, choose in the evil and fight it. Because yes, oh, I can't solve all the world's problems. Well, then go feed the homeless. Well, I can't solve all the world's problems. Well, set up a drug addiction counseling center or volunteer. I can't do anything, but well, do something. Choose one thing. I know we can't solve all the world's problems. I can't either, but we can all choose one small area and fight there. And if we had organized teams of, and or organized communities spread throughout the country, we all share the same values. We all know we want to preserve humanity and freedom and beauty and grace and life, and we will do what it takes to do that. Um, who has to send out orders? Nobody has to send out orders. You don't need to, you know, get on the radio, okay, everybody do this. No, everybody's doing that anyways because they're formed initially around the same common values. And that's what I mean by a leaderless revolution.
Mm-hmm. Is in part your book that you are working on about this, forming communities and
Yes, the tentative title for the book right now is The Complete Guide to Forming Communities for Mutual aid support and charity. And the thing is, we need to start with the community first. And this is something people don't know how to do. Um, the current smartphone disease is terrible. It's having a terrible effect on humanity. People don't know how to communicate anymore, and they certainly don't know how to work together and form voluntary associations. And by that I mean it's again forming the community, but you do that because you want to and you do it on a voluntary basis. People think they're part of a community because they go to work, but that's not voluntary. You go to work because you have to go to work because you have to pay the bills, or otherwise you go to sleep underneath the highway tomorrow night. So it's hardly a voluntary association. And all the people you meet at work and you have to work with, you didn't choose them to be your co-workers. Somebody else chose them. So it's not voluntary on your part. And what we need to do is create our own voluntary community. So if I go for a meeting with, you know, 5, 10 other people, all those people are people that I want to be associated with, that I've met, that I get along with, that we share the values that we, you know, together. So I want to be there. So that's an involuntary association. But we don't know how to do that. So part of the book is to, well, it's twofold. One is to, first of all, give people the idea that forming voluntary associations amongst themselves to solve any number of, you know, social ills is a viable and probably the only solution that we have. You know, we can, there's a lot of things, you know, if there's a lot of homelessness or drug addiction in your area, then you can form a community that will serve as a support group, just somewhere people can go and talk and maybe pool some resources and maybe apply for some grants together. So that's one form of community. It's not a revolution. It's not a leaderless. It's not a survival group. It's not a militia. It's just a group of people that help each other. Same thing with depression. One of the key causes of depression and as a result, addiction and suicide is loneliness. People are lonely. They have no connection to their families, their culture, their history. They're alienated. Again, part of the plan of these psychopaths. And so just getting a group of people, 6 people together, meet once every 2 weeks for coffee at the cafe down the street has shown that by sending people that are clinically depressed into a small group like that twice a week, once every 2 weeks, twice a month, drastically reduces their depression. Just the very act of being around a few people and talking and having a coffee already makes a big difference. So why not form a small loneliness support group? Just a few people. All you need to do is get together and have coffee. That's it. No incorporation, no hierarchy, no rules and bylaws. Just people that you've met that share a similar loneliness and a need for companionship and support. And again, the benefits far outweigh whatever effort or $2 for a coffee that you spend. So we can start with these simple, very small communities that focus on a specific need. But what our ancestors did, and your great grandmother, I guarantee you, she was probably a part of a community that was like a mutual aid or a fraternity or a friendly society. And these were self-formed communities that would provide more in-depth services. For example, they might provide health insurance. In the days before government health insurance, people that were poor and couldn't afford a health insurance, what they would do is join a lodge, like the Moose Lodge or the Oddfellows Lodge. And there were thousands of these lodges back in the 1800s. And many of them were like women's associations or freed slaves associations. And what they did is they pooled their money. It was a monthly membership fee, and it was equivalent to what today would be maybe $100 a month. And but for that $100 a month, they would get health insurance. Now in the United States, I think a family has to pay at least $1,500 a month. To me, that's a mortgage payment just for health insurance, and that's government health insurance with a $15,000 deductible. I mean, basically, you're getting nothing for your money. And in those days, under these friendly associations, just pooling your money, they're able to not only get health insurance, but they also got emergency funds in case you lost your job and you needed to pay the rent. Well, the club would pay the rent for you. So they'll pitch in, they'll pay the rent. So that's another variation of forming a small community. These ones would tend to be, 10, 50, 100, maybe 500 people. Um, and they were wildly successful until the government came along and destroyed them. They did so on purpose through a number of different laws and associations, and not the least of which was the American Medical Association in the United States. They hated this lodge system because all these working class people were getting health insurance for cheap. We can't let that happen. So the insurance companies, the medical association, the government all joined in to destroy these associations. Doesn't mean you can't still start one. You just don't have to advertise it. We can call it a different name. We can work, underground beneath the radar, and again provide health insurance and emergency funds. And excuse me. Another example is one that I learned when I lived in China. Very prevalent in Asia and the Philippines, Korea, Japan, and that is a lending circle. So here, let's say you want to start a small business. Okay.
Yeah, I know that from Kenya.
You know that from Kenya? Okay.
Mm.
Yeah, I think they did that there too, right?
Mm.
So you want to start a small business here in Canada. I can go to the bank if I feel like wasting my time and filling out a bunch of forms. Banks don't lend you money if you need money.
Mm.
Only if you don't need money do they lend you money. So, but let's say I have a good idea. I want to start up a small business. Well, the Chinese and the Asians, what they would do is they would get 10, 15, maybe 20 families. They would all invest money in a pool.
Mm.
That kitty, that box, they would then raffle, or people could bid on the money in the box to form a business. And what they would bid is they would bid interest rate. So, okay, lend me $5,000, and in 2 years I'll pay you back with 10% interest. Another guy would say, well, I need the $10,000, but I can pay back 15% interest. And so whoever they decide had the best business proposal, they would get the money. So they could open up a business, and then all the people in the lending circle, because listen, they're all invested in this business. In a sense, they're shareholders in the business. So of course, they're going to promote the business. They're going to help find clients. They're going to help get cheaper suppliers. Everybody works together, makes that business a success. And when it becomes successful, everybody gets their money back plus a little bit more. And now they can take that money and start another business.
Mm.
So it's very practical here. Okay, you want to start a business? Well, unless you can find somebody to give you the money or loan you the money, somebody that has a lot of money, an angel investor, it's very, very difficult. But basically, you don't have a chance. You don't have a chance to start a business. And you can't start a business without money. All these get rich quick schemes that you always see on the internet. It used to be on TV. Now it's everywhere on the internet. Oh, I made, $400,000 in my first month. Please. you know, these again, they're con artists. You can't make money. You can't start a business without money. And so you do need seed capital. And unless you're well connected or you have, you're able to find angel investors, there's no other place. So if you have some guy that he's just a really good baker and he wants to open up a bakery and produce this recipe, it's a very good bread, nobody's going to lend him money. Forget about it. But the people that he knows that ate his bread, that love his baking, they might give him the money. And so he starts a bakery and then it could be successful. He doesn't need a huge.
Mm.
So that's, again, another variation on a community. And then the final, and we can go on. I can name hundreds of examples where it's very simple to bring people together. So the book is aimed at, first of all, giving you the ideas. What I plan to do is, go through the table of contents. What is the problem you want to solve? Money, illness, health, old age, retirement, startup business, food, heating oil, name your problem, go through the list, and there will be examples of types of communities that you can start. And also instructions on how to start them. Excuse me. So, do you need to incorporate it? Sometimes it might be a good idea to incorporate. Maybe you want to register it as a nonprofit. Sometimes there's advantages to registering it as a nonprofit. I will show you or explain to you the benefits and the drawbacks of each of those various ways of forming. So maybe it's good to form a nonprofit because you're getting lots of donations from corporations. Okay, good. But on the other hand, you're also subject to inspection and revenue inspections, and you have to do a lot of reporting and licensing. Maybe that, so then it's not practical if you're just getting a few $100s worth of donations. So again, it's up to the person and what they're trying to achieve, but there are advantages and disadvantages to incorporating or becoming unincorporated or just having a loose agreement. So we could have a loose agreement. So I'm going to include samples of contracts that people can draw up. I'll leave the names blank and I'm going to put it up on the internet so you can download the information package. I'm trying to make it really easy, Judith. I know people are lazy and I know they don't want to go through the research of how to do it and go to the office and they don't want to have to write up their own charter or their own statements and things like that. It's a lot of work and people are too busy and too lazy to do it. So I'm going to give it to you. When you buy the book, you'll get the link, download all the copies, then fill in your name. So it's ABC Community Food Co-op, and there you go. And then how much money you need, and this is the cooperation. And these are the letter of agreement between members. We promise to pay $50 a month in groceries every month, and donate whatever it takes, whatever the agreement would be. So then it's very simple. Everybody gets a form. They know what the rules are. Everybody agrees, and you sign it. Now, if you had to, you could, of course, take somebody to court for breach of contract. Hopefully it wouldn't be necessary. The most important thing is that people understand these are the rules that we all are going to follow. And if you don't follow the rules, then we kick you out of the co-op. That's whatever it is. Or if you don't follow the rules and you embezzle the co-op, then we kick you out and we prosecute you. And so that'll all be available, different variations on organizational structures and how to form groups. And then I'm also going to include, hopefully not too much because I don't want to spend a lot of time. This book is already going to be huge. Tricks on, how to cooperate with each other, how to set up a meeting, how to vote on topics, how to solve disputes among members. For example, I don't believe in a democracy. I think once you establish a community, whatever structure it is, that if anybody wants to change the rules, it has to be an 85% vote. I mean, if the vast majority of people don't think this is a good idea, because otherwise you're just asking to be split down the middle. If it's a 51%, 49% vote, we change the rules, then of course you're going to split every community down the middle within a couple of months. So before we make any changes to the community or the way things are run, if they say, well, we want to change the location of the meetings, okay, let's change the locations. Everybody in favor, it has to be 85%. Because maybe it's only convenient for 51% and the other 49% now have to drive 2 hours further. So to make sure that it stays cohesive, I think people should vote at a rate of 85% to make any major changes, unlike our country now. Can you imagine if our governments had to get 85% of the country's vote, every citizen's vote before they can pass another law? Well, they wouldn't have passed a law since 1880, which would have been a good thing because
yeah.
Right? All these laws are just useless anyways. It's just more infringements. The only thing laws do is take away your rights and increase taxes. And so if they couldn't pass a law, perfect. Yeah, great. Don't pass any laws. Don't do anything. But for the health and survivability of your own personal community, yeah, no, nobody gets to pass no laws unless the vast majority of people think, boy, yeah, that is a good idea. Let's do that. So there will be all these types of ways of running a community, how to vote, do you need a chairperson? Well, you do for a lot of situations. And how do you chair a meeting? How do you call a meeting? And things like that. And if there's a dispute and, we take it to a tribunal or a study group, things like that. These are all things most people have no idea how to do anymore. You're not taught that in school. Of course not. They don't want you to learn how to create a community. I mean, it's taught in some degree in business school, but not really.
Yeah, you are trained to be a servant to the system and to produce revenue.
Exactly. You're not trained to look after your own best interests because your own best interests are usually in conflict with the best interests of the corporation. So I plan to put all that in the book. Now, the final key or the final secret is whatever group you establish. And again, I take this from my study of history. For example, when I lived in China, I was friends with quite a few members of Chinese mafia, the gangsters,
Okay.
the triads. And the reason for that is I studied Kung Fu. And Kung Fu schools have a long tradition of being hangouts for triads. This goes way back. And the reason that happened is many Kung Fu schools started out as anti-government, subversive guerrilla groups. I'm thinking, for example, the Red Turbans, which was a group that tried to fight against the Mongols in the 12th and 13th century after the Mongols had invaded China and taken over. And so the Mongol Empire ruled China, and of course the native Chinese hated them, wanted to get rid of them, so they had anti-government organizations, and they were underground guerrilla groups, and they called themselves the Red Turbans. Then back into the moving forward into the 16th century with the Manchu invasion, these were again a foreign invader from Manchuria. They weren't considered to be Chinese. Most Westerners would never be able to tell them apart, but the Chinese considered them foreign invaders. And again, there was a number of anti-government organizations started underground, called for example, the White Lotus Society, and the one to which I belonged to, which is the Tiandi Hui Bang, which is the Heaven, Earth, and Man Society. Heaven, Earth, Man, three. And so their nickname became the Triads. So the Kung Fu school in which I studied, its origin goes back to an anti-government organization during the Manchu dynasty. And what happened when their secondary function, aside from being an anti-guerrilla underground movement, was as a mutual aid society. And so it was the same groups, the triads, that when Chinese immigrants moved to the United States in the 1860s, they were the ones that set up, houses and halls where Chinese expats could meet and network and find investment funds for businesses and, and education, and they would put people through school. Again, these were all part of the functions provided by the triads. Now, at this time, the triads weren't considered gangsters. They were considered a mutual aid society. So they provided mutual aid services to their members, and they were also anti-government. That was sort of their secondary purpose. What happened later on was when the Manchus finally were displaced, their whole purpose in fighting against the government sort of dissolved, and they ended up it turning out was more profitable to become a mafia. And so they morphed into a mafia association, and that's why now you hear the triads, and it has a bad reputation as a bunch of gangsters. But it didn't start out that way. And so what could happen in the future if we find ourselves under a severe tyrannical government, and that's where we're going with the facial recognition and the social credit system they have there in China, that Orwellian nightmare of a dictatorship in China. Unbelievable. What a horror. If that comes here, yeah, it's just going to be really bad. But under those circumstances, now the group that you formed to get together to fight loneliness can now get together to provide each other with information, set up safe houses, places where you can go if you're being pursued by the police, how to go underground, just like the Underground Railroad during slavery times in the United States. They had a string of safe houses set up all across the country where people could go and hide in the basement for a couple of days and then move on. Whatever group you start now could turn into that in a year from now, right? That's what happened to, like I said, the triads. They started out that way, and they became, with the triads, their final big hoorah came during the Boxer Rebellion, and American machine guns pretty much put an end to the triads after that. But that is what happens historically. If you are not a part of a community during such times, you won't survive. You'll be the first one to go to the labor camp. But if you can be a part of that community, then people can help each other. If you have to hide from the police, then somebody can come and bring food to you, things like that. And that's how you survive. And so whatever community we form now for noble altruistic reasons, such as poverty and healthcare and mental health and hunger and homelessness, should we be forced at the point of a gun to transform that organization into something more militant, then we can do so. And I will try to leave hints in the book, some advice on that. And that would therefore form, in effect, a leaderless revolution.
Mm-hmm. Somebody might be tempted to think that if I go along with the system, then I will not end up in a labor camp. Do you think that will work?
No, it doesn't work.
Okay, thank you for saying that.
No, I hear that all the time. That's the cowards that I talk to here. Oh, I don't want to stick my head out. I don't want to stick my neck out. I'll just do my job. And I said, why, you think they're not going to come for you if you do that? Yeah, that way, because you say things, they're going to come for you. Yeah, true. They're coming for me. I'm at the top of the list. You're number 10. Okay. Don't think you're not on the list. You are on the list. uh, people say, oh, what I used to say is, it's not that the list you're on, it's the list you're not on. And the list you're not on is the people that run the world and have special above the law status. That's the list you need to be on. And if you're not on the list, you're on the other list. And no, there is no pretending to go along. They will come for you. In the Cultural Revolution in China, with the Red Guard. And it
Mm.
started off there very much. I mean, the parallels between what happened in China in the 1960s and what is going on in Europe and in North America here right now with the liberals, the socialists, the communists. Listen, let's face it, they're communists. You pull off the mask of a liberal, there's a socialist. You pull off the mask of a socialist, there's a communist. You pull off the mask of a communist, there's a bloodthirsty murderer, can't wait to get his fingers around your throat. So what they did during the Red Guard revolution in China, they started off in the beginning, against imperialists, and then they had the four olds: old culture, old thinking, old art, old writing. We had to destroy that, so they destroyed all that. And then they put, of course, they first come for the intellectuals. So it was the college professors, the poets, the musicians, the writers, the philosophers. Well, we have to purge them first. So now everybody's thinking, oh, see, look, they're going after the college professors. Thank God I'm only a
That's not
musician.
me.
Thank God that's not me. I'm only a musician. Or
Mm.
thank God that's not me. I'm only a kindergarten teacher. Or thank God that's not me. I only a manager in a newspaper. I'm not one of the reporters. Doesn't matter. They come for you anyways. And what happened with the Red Guard was the factionalism got more and more extreme, exactly what we're seeing here. So now the factions within the Red Guard were accusing each other of being counter-revolutionary. Oh,
Yeah.
if you don't like gays, now you're the counter-revolutionary. No, wait, I like to have sex with young boys, and if you don't, you're the counter-revolutionary. And they would, which is exactly what we're seeing now. You can't be communist enough if you think that boys shouldn't wear dresses. Now you're a fascist and a counter-revolutionary. Well, what happened with the Red Guards is they ended up having running gun battles in the streets. There were factions. They were going up and down from house to house. One faction of the Red Guard shooting it out with the other faction of the Red Guard. Eventually, it spun so far out of control. And by this time, Mao was a senile old pedophile, anyways, that his wife and a couple of the other people stepped in and they said, this has gotten crazy. And they sent in the Red Guard, and the Red Guard rounded them up, and anybody that didn't cooperate got shot. And that was the end of the Red Army, the People's Liberation Army,
Mm.
came in and shot up everybody in the Red Guard that didn't cooperate. And now what's left of them is called the dancing grannies throughout China. These former communist Red Guard members that didn't get wiped out and had denounced their parents, because remember they turned in their own parents for execution. It's a really sad interview with one Chinese man who's now, of course, he's in his 70s, and he cries about how he, denounced his mother to the Red Guard, and they rounded her up and they killed her. And now he's 70 years old, realizes what an idiot he was. Too late, of course, his mother's dead. But there you think, well, I'm a member of the Red Guard. I'm doing everything the government wants me to do. Well, now you have to denounce your family, and then we're going to kill them. So there is no escape. And,
Mm.
and the ones that did live through it, there are these really obnoxious old ladies that go into public parks, play music really loud, and dance. It's the
Yeah.
weirdest thing. The dancing grannies of China. They're
And
just
if you, sorry,
obnoxious.
and
Hmm?
if you have done a lot of dirty work for the government, then chances are sooner or later they will come for you anyway, so that you cannot talk about it.
Of course. And the same thing, for example, in Stalinist Russia, how many times did they have to airbrush another mass murderer out of the photo, of Stalin, because his usefulness was used up. Good,
Mm.
good, Igor. You murdered 30 million people, but now you have to go.
Thank you for your services.
Thank you for your service. The car is waiting for you. Because that's the world of the psychopaths. That's the world. That's so the only hope I have, Judith, that we don't all, end up in a smoking heap of misery is because I do know the psychopaths and that eventually they always turn on each other.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't really have, and again, we don't have to get the guns and man the barriers in the streets like the French Revolution, because same in the French Revolution, they eventually turn on themselves and they kill the psychopaths battle it out because they all want the power now. Okay, we've killed all the priests and we killed all the workers and we killed all the good people and the intellectuals. Now we have power, but those psychopaths have the power, so they start fighting amongst each other. They kill each other off. My point with this book is, for those of us who are a little bit normal, have an IQ above 100, and have some moral compass.
Above room temperature.
Yeah, above room temperature would even be good. But I'm sorry, no, I'm a bit of a snob. I have a fairly high IQ. I really think I can't. I can't be around people with an IQ less than 110. It's so boring. They're so dull. I can do it. I mean, I don't mean to sound superior and it's that I'm better than, it's not that I'm better than them. It's just that I get bored, they're not that interesting. I find people with a high IQ that have a vital life. Them I find interesting. There's lots of Joe average. I don't need to be friends with every one of them and hang out with them all the time. But so get some people together with an IQ above 105, and survive. And if you can survive it while they tear each other apart, while they go searching for people to send to the camps, you're smart enough to survive it and stay underground, stay quiet, not cooperate with the government. I'm talking about really counter espionage techniques. There's a whole trick to that, and it can be done now in the modern age with even with all the electronic surveillance. There are ways of avoiding surveillance and facial recognition. You just got to learn how to do it. You have to be a bit of an actor. You have to be a bit of a spy, but you're going to, everybody in the group has to act like James Bond a little bit. You'll need code words. You'll know how to. You need to know where you can go in the city that doesn't have surveillance cameras, or a corner that you can walk around, and for 2 minutes you won't be under surveillance. Things like that. You plan that out. You map it all out, and eventually you can just avoid as much government detection as possible and work together and stay alive. And then when they succeed in cutting each other's throats in one big orgy of greed and blood, then you can come back out and go, okay, now we're going to make a bakery again.
Would you say that we are first and foremost in a spiritual warfare?
It is a spiritual warfare, absolutely. And I've talked about this with a few other people. Because, and again, this is the reason I wrote the book, The Way of the Warrior. My first book is The Art of Urban Survival, and it's basically a Boy Scout manual for adults on how to avoid all the dangers and risks of living in an urban environment. So I cover, crime, natural disasters, corruption, war, riots, home invasions, biological attacks. Very simple. It's not, it's just enough information that it won't scare most people. You can read it. It's good for college students. They don't have to read too much, but it'll give them the most important information they need to survive those situations for at least 3 days or maybe longer. After that, you might need more in-depth skills, but most people die from some stupid thing they did at the very beginning of a disaster. The last time we had a flood here, I used a ham radio during a disaster, and then I listened to the police and the ambulance communications. But then you know what's going on. Listen to the radio; they don't tell you anything. The radio told us the next day there was a flood. Yeah, when you're up to your neck, you're still waiting for the radio to tell you, and they're predicting sunny weather today, and you're drowning. You know, the next day, oh yeah, there was a flood. So public broadcasting was useless. I tested this myself many times. Um, so you need a ham radio or a police scanner. I don't know if that's allowed in Germany. Probably not. But this
Who
way,
cares?
huh?
Who cares?
Yeah, get one. You know, get one a cheap one from China. They're like $60 or something like
Mm.
Baofeng. I have one, and I use it to tune in. So when I was able to tune in, I knew right away, oh, so many people trapped in elevators when the power went out. So many people now search and rescue are going up and down the river because there was a flash flood, and there were people that went to the river to look at the flood, and they got washed away. You know, so a typical example of how many people lose their lives, and of course they never found their body or they drowned. But there you go. Hello, stupid. Don't stand at the edge of the river when there's raging waters and floods. So the book is meant to prevent that type of thing. You know, don't go down to a bad neighborhood late at night wearing gold jewelry. Sorry, guys, don't do that.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah,
and,
and we are happily unlearning all our skills voluntarily.
yeah.
Just the other day, I saw a couple. They were on bicycles, and they were obviously doing a tour here. And believe it or not, she had a GPS on her bicycle that was talking to her. And I thought to myself, really?
Yeah.
With your bike, you are using a GPS?
Hmm.
So, yeah, what else do you want to lose?
Hmm.
You know, simple orientation. I don't know what to say.
Oh, I know, Judith. I'm the same way. You know, I used to teach orientation at the conservation area here years ago when I was younger. I taught wilderness survival for the Toronto Boys Home. Took boys that had been in trouble with the police. They were in a halfway house. In the summer, it was my job to take them up north and spend a week with each group in the forest, far away from any phones or transportation. No roads were up there, no radios. You're up there, you got hurt. Well, then you've got 2 days of hiking and paddling to get back to civilization. I hope you don't die in the meantime. Um, and I taught orientation as well, you know, topographical map, a compass. This is your location, you know, 200 meters to the south, take another reading. And then, you know, and I practice that to this day. I never use a GPS. I've never seen one. I wouldn't get one. And I had one of my students come to visit me when I was living in California. And everybody that knows me, I'm welcome. You come and visit, but we won't be going to the coffee house. We go to the park, we go to the lake, we go to the river, we go for a bicycle or canoe ride. Nothing makes me more bored than to sit in a coffee house. We'll talk in the canoe, okay? We'll talk as we bicycle. We'll talk once I take you to this beautiful spot up in the mountains where you can look over the vista and the landscape, and there's wild animals, and there we'll talk. I don't want to talk in some crowded cafeteria or some bar. I don't do that anymore. When I was younger, sure. So I take my students, I take them up into the mountains there in Ventura County. And there's a place that I discovered because I like to explore. It was an old amphitheater that was built in the 1890s and has long since been abandoned. Nobody goes there, but it still looks like an old Roman theater, right? It was a semicircular with rows of stairs and benches, and all underneath the oak trees and the California sunshine up in the mountains. Beautiful. Nobody goes there. I have the whole place to myself, so I'll take them up there. And
Mm.
so he's sitting there, and he's a young guy, you know, and he says, you know, oh, how are we going to get back? I said, what? Well, do you know how to get back? I said, of course I do. He said, oh, yeah, I'm no good with directions. I always get lost. I said, oh, because he was my Kung Fu student, right? So I said, oh, okay, well, now we have a new lesson for you today. And he says, what's that? I said, you go home alone. I'll wait here. You go. I'll be back. I'll follow you in an hour. See if I can find your dead body afterwards. You know, he was terrified. I mean, Judith, please, just like this girl on the bicycle. You're on a bicycle path. How can you get lost? You know, how can you get lost? Why do you need some? Keep going on this path. Okay, in another 5 minutes, keep going on this path. Come on, for Christ's sakes. Use your eyes, use your senses, your sense of direction. All and a sense of direction. You can train that too. You can tell north from south. You don't need a compass if you've trained your body and your brain to detect it. Anyways, I said, okay, Jason, you go home. And he was terrified. Well, it was a little bit scary. We did see a mountain lion up there. And a mountain lion did eat and kill 4 bicyclists in the previous month. So there was a bit of a concern. But I knew the mountain lion wasn't where we were anyway. So he made his way back. Of course, it's simple. It's a bicycle trail. The same way we came, that's the way you go back. He found his way back. But it changed him. The next time I saw him was here in Canada. He says, I want to come and see you. I said, well, you know me. I'm down by the lake. I'm near this island. He says, well, how do I get there? And I said, well, you know, Jason, it's your problem. You got to figure it out. Well, he found me all right. And it turned out that in the meantime, since that trip in California, he had taken an orientation course. And he learned how to read a compass, and he learned how to read a map, and he learned how to, you know, get his sense in the environment, his geographical location within an environment. And it's a skill. It's not hard to learn, but you have to learn it. Somebody has to teach you it, or otherwise you don't automatically figure it out by yourself for no good reason. And again, one of the many skills we have lost, right, Judith?
Yeah, and I'm sometimes shocked, even skills like that people are no longer able to cook a meal.
Oh, I'll give you another example. Another one of my students, again in California. This boy was, I think he was 29, maybe 30 years old. I still think of him as a boy. I wasn't that much older, 20 years older. And, oh, I want to study, you know, Kung Fu with you. And I would teach him a little bit, but same thing again. I said, well, you know me, you want to come and study Kung Fu, we're going to go up into the mountains. What is more beautiful, Judith? I'm telling you, people that go to these clubs and they sit under the fluorescent lights and they do their yoga or they do their no. I want to be in the mountains, you know, just like in the movies, you know, the Kung Fu movies, the great master, he trains in the mountains. And I saw that when I was in China, when I was in Taiwan. I remember one time, this old man, he must have been in his 80s, and it was like 6 o'clock in the morning, and he was playing with the spear, and he was beautiful. He was spinning and doing his martial arts, and it was up in the mountains in a bamboo forest. My God, it was like a movie, you know. So I said to him, I said, okay, well, Zach, we'll go up to the mountains. I said, you got a bicycle? He said, oh yeah, I got a bicycle. I said, okay, well then no problem. We'll bike up there. So he comes, he's got a bicycle in the back of his pickup truck. He pulls out the bicycle and he says, well, I think there's something wrong with the bicycle. I said, yeah, the chain is off the sprocket. Oh, can you fix that? Now, I'm a Dutchman. I was raised on a bicycle. I said, okay, watch closely, Zach. See this finger? Under the chain, up and over the sprocket. There, fixed. Oh, yeah, I didn't know you could do that. Yeah. I mean, a 30-year-old man, he had a 12-year-old daughter, and he can't put the chain back on a bicycle. Oh, then there was another problem. He says, well, something wrong with the tires. I said, yeah, there's no air in your tires. Oh, well, what should I do? I said, here's the bicycle pump. I gave him my bicycle pump. And he looks at it, and he looks at it, he flips it over, looks at the tire, looks at the bicycle pump. I said, you never used a bicycle pump before in your life? I mean, Judith, when I was 6 years old, we were building bicycles. We would go to the junkyard and find different parts, and sometimes the bicycle would have a 6-inch tire in the front and a 20-inch tire in the back and handlebars and seats. I mean, we built them from scratch and put them together. That's what we did since we were little kids. This guy doesn't know how to use a bicycle pump. It's tragic what's happened to the younger generation. And you know they're so dependent on that technology that if they don't have the GPS, well, they're all going to walk off the cliff now, I guess. I don't know. Um, but I had an advantage in that I grew up, and the school I attended when I was in public school was very close to Black Creek Pioneer Village, which was a recreation village where people lived and worked like the pioneers, like the 1880s. And we spent a lot of time there. So I learned a lot of those things. I learned how to shear sheep and how to spin wool and how to weave. I can weave. I know how to use a loom. I know how to bake bread. I know how
Yeah,
to fudge. I know how to make candles. I know all that stuff. I have a lot of those skills that are completely gone nowadays. But without technology, you're going to need those skills.
yeah, of course. Wow. So,
And
yeah, go ahead.
another area, I was an instructor for St. John Ambulance, which is a volunteer ambulance service. We also train people in first aid and CPR, work for the Red
Mm.
Cross. And I have really good emergency medical skills that I've picked up over the years, not only through my my job as a trainer and an instructor, because while we were part of the Corps, we'd also have, and this was before paramedics came in, we were one of the earlier forms of paramedics. We also would have doctors come in and give us extra lessons in emergency procedures. And so, boy, if you got hurt and there was nobody else around but me, you would be lucky, because
Mm.
I know what to do. I can stop bleeding and prevent further damage, and I've expanded that into areas like health and nutrition and medicinal herbs. And these are skills you need to know, because in the pioneer days, in the old days, and if you got sick, it was usually grandmother that came over, and she would know what to do, and she would make some chicken dinner and chicken soup, and don't knock chicken soup. And the Chinese love it, chicken soup. I learned the recipe there in China. They call it medicine chicken. Tastes awful. The worst chicken soup you ever ate. It's full of ginger and garlic and all these other spices and herbs. And the bone broth is very healthy for you. The gelatin is also very healthy. They would, people didn't go to a hospital when they got sick when they were 100 years ago. They had, the relatives come over, the aunt, the grandmother, the mother, women that knew natural cures and treatments. And then if none of that helped, and if things really got bad, okay, well, then maybe they'll go to see a doctor. But 90 percent of the time, it was just some healthy food and some care and consideration, some herbs, and they'd be fine. So those are also skills that I don't see young people having at all.
Yeah, and especially these days, I think it's very important to be more sovereign with your healthcare in general. And that starts with eating properly. And yeah, you might tell yourself, yeah, but good eating is expensive, but what you will save in the long run on medical bills, that,
Yeah. Or
yeah.
if you can't afford it, I'm a very poor person.
Yeah.
That's what happens when you're good and decent. You tend not to get too famous or too rich. But a very healthy practice is to fast.
Mm.
And I'm working with a doctor friend of mine, one of my friends from California, and he's working on a book on how to not grow old. And one of the things he keeps telling me about is, the latest research in fasting. And I said, yeah, well, I used to fast. I fasted a couple of times, for 3 days, but I found it very difficult. And he says, no, fasting for as little as 12 hours already has a huge influence on reducing inflammation, because all these diseases and old age, all of it is basically what he says, and not just him, I've read other researchers, is inflammation. And inflammation usually caused by stress and, and toxins in the environment, and so you need to reduce it. And that fasting will reduce the inflammation. If you reduce the inflammation, you don't age. You know, you don't get arthritis, you don't get diabetes, you don't get Alzheimer's. And so the benefit is, if you fast for 1 or 2 days a week, you can save that money and buy good food for the rest of the week.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Right. So, you know, I bought a couple of little steaks. Like I eat a little bit of meat, but mostly I cook Chinese. I'm a very good cook myself. I like Chinese food, and so I cook Chinese food. I'm also really good at cooking croquettes. Oh, I love croquettes. But the good stuff, with beef and mushrooms and a little bit of spinach. Yeah, lekker.
Yeah,
So,
I I cook myself as well. I'm a very good chef, but I do not touch any animal products.
well, I only eat very little. Like
Mm.
I would say the not even as much as the size of a pack of cigarettes. You know,
Mm.
about half
Yeah.
of that a day. You know. Anyways, I bought a couple of little fast fry steaks. I fry them up quickly in the pan for my Chinese. I bought them like 3 days ago, but I fasted for 2 days, so I still got them. I don't have them in grocery shopping now in a week because I still got the food, because I've been fasting on and off a little bit. You know.
Mm. So, where can we buy your book and when?
Well, I'm working on it now. My last book, The Way of the Warrior, I had a crowdfunding campaign for it 3 years ago, which was very successful. I raised $6,000, so I could spend the time to finish it. See, the problem is, Judith, is I've been working on this book for seriously 4 years now, and then I put it on the back burner. I left it, you know.
Mm.
But to do the final push, you can't focus on anything else but the
Yeah.
book, right? Because there's so many levels involved in the book. You have to know that what you wrote in chapter 1 is not repeated again in chapter 17. You know, that the logic and the flow of thought. So you have to immerse yourself in the material, and it's time consuming. I'm afraid to get started. You know, typically what will happen is I wake up, I have coffee, and I start at 7 o'clock in the morning. Then I'll take a look. It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Oh my God, where did it? Okay,
Mm.
half an hour break. Okay, let's get back to work. Next time I look up, it's 10 o'clock at night. The time flies by, and this goes day by day, week by week. Um, and in the meantime, I still have to pay the bills, and I do that through other occupations, other activities. I can't, I can't do both. So what I've done in the past is ask people. It's the same as if I got a book contract. My first couple of books were published by, uh, um, you know, publishers in California, in Berkeley, in San Francisco, and well, they send you $5,000. Okay, now I got $5,000. I don't have to worry about all these little part-time jobs for a while. I can now focus on finishing the book. But for this book, I can't go to a publisher with it. This won't get published by a major publisher. So I have to raise the $5,000 myself. And I'm doing a GoFundMe campaign to raise the money. And then hopefully I can devote July and August to finishing the book. And it'll be out first week in September. I'm thinking Labor Day. So that's when that book will be out.
Mhm. And it is best for you if people order that from your website, correct?
Yeah. So if people go to, you can go to my GoFundMe page or go to my website, and that'll take you to a GoFundMe page. I'm not asking for charity. I'm saying if you order an advance copy, then that will help me to finish writing it now. And in 2 months, you get it. You get what you paid for. You'll get the book, you know.
Mm.
So I can't take charity, Judith. I have a very hard time asking people for help to begin with,
Mm.
but I certainly wouldn't ask for help unless I was actually giving something back of equal value. So I'm not asking for charity. I'm asking buy an advanced copy, $10 for a PDF. And then in September, I email you the PDF, boom. And but what that would do is help me now to finish it. If I were to try and publish it and then come out and then sell it in September and get the money back that I spent the previous 3 months, you know, I can't afford it anyways. But let's say I got a loan or whatever, it just wouldn't work. I would be living under the overpass long before that.
Yeah. So I will link to everything that you mentioned to your website, chinastrategies.com, and to the GoFundMe. I will link to all of that.
Oh, thank you.
And so that folks can make the decision to buy it early and help you out with the bills. And I hope, Stefan, you will come back to my show.
Sure, have me back. I'm always happy to speak to people about this topic. Um, I've already exposed myself, so I have nothing else to lose. Um, like I said, I tell my buddies, yeah, I am on the list. That's right. I'm number 3. You're number 10. I know a few people that are number 1
Yeah.
on the list, but we're all on the list. So you might as well fight now while we still can. Right now, they're not shooting people in the street. Okay. So let's not be big babies about things. Let's go out and talk to our friends and our relatives and our family. And if they think you're crazy or you're a neo-Nazi or you're something bad, a bad person, doesn't matter. Who cares what they think about you? You have to try and make the effort to win people over to the side of sanity, because the world is insane. It's run by lunatics. And there's, even, and unless you have a really strong constitution, they will drive everybody else crazy too. So let's try to save the people around us, form some communities and talk to them. And that is the only way. There is no other way. There's no political party. There's no, getting guns and running in the streets, shooting people. None of that is ever going to work. It never worked in the past. It won't work now. The only thing that will work is a movement, a real grassroots movement. All the other stuff you've seen before, that was all,
That stays grassroots and for the most part hidden.
Exactly. Yeah, that was all, astroturf. It looks like grassroots, but it's plastic. It was all invented, right? Like
Yeah.
the Black Lives Movement, right? These guys didn't organize nothing that was paid for by George Soros or whatever agent of evil they have working around, But a real grassroots movement would be the leaderless revolution, the tens of thousands of small communities that support each other. And you can't be subverted because, and the same thing, like, oh, will somebody come in and screw up your organization? No. I plan to include in the book a questionnaire that you can hand potential members to test if they're a psychopath. It's not obvious in the questionnaire. We just say, well, here's a medical questionnaire to join the group. Well, we need to know if you have any serious medical conditions in case, we're at a barbecue and you fall over. We need to know what to do. And here's a mental health questionnaire. We just need to make sure that we don't need to bring in any extra counselors. But the mental health questionnaire is going to be a psychopathic checklist.
Okay.
Okay. Well, you have to be a little bit sneaky, because you can't tell the psychopath, well, we need to know if you're a psychopath or not, because then they know to fake the test results. You can't tell them that. So sometimes you have to be, and something as simple as, you tell them, okay, can you please wait in this room here? We'll be there in 10 minutes. And he sees under the table there $10. Does he put it in his pocket there, or does he leave it? You got to test people like that. This is just being smart. This is what, spycraft, this is what espionage agencies do too. They test their members to see how far you can trust them. You have to. You can't allow people that are unstable or psychopaths into your organization, because then it's all for nothing. They will destroy everything. So very important to be able to filter these types of people out and only have the most high quality people in your group. And if that means being a little bit sneaky, okay, well, you know, this is the way the world is. That's what strategy is. You know, read Machiavelli. You know,
Mm.
all she did was tell everybody how to be sneaky, and but it's for your own self-protection. So it's the same as, you know, allowing somebody to eat out of your chicken soup bowl that has tuberculosis. You got to know if they have tuberculosis, and then they have to be fed the food separately in a separate bowl.
Yeah.
That's the same thing with whoever you're going to invite to join your community. You got to know that they don't have some disease that's going to kill everybody. And one of those diseases is being a psychopath. So that'll all be in there.
Yeah.
See what a big book it is? Oh.
Yeah, excellent. I can't wait for it. So thank you again so much for coming.
You're welcome, Judith.
Great talk. And I enjoyed this very much. So everybody, this was Night Flight for today. And everybody take good care of yourself, work on your skills, and we see you next time. Bye-bye.